On the night of June 7, 2021, Officer Robert Henshaw was driving his patrol car along County Road 45 on the outskirts of Bakersfield, California. It was one of those nights when the desert heat finally gave way to a cool breeze coming from the mountains. Robert was alone on patrol, something that didn't usually bother him. He was a veteran with almost 18 years of service. He had seen it all. At least, that's what I thought. The call came in over the radio shortly after 9 o'clock at night. A green pickup truck was parked haphazardly on the road, lights off, engine off. A passing motorist reported that someone was inside the vehicle, but the person didn't respond when he honked. Robert confirmed he was on his way and sped down the deserted road. County Road was known as a secondary road used by locals, almost always empty after 8 o'clock at night. There were no streetlights, only the occasional glow of a distant house and the patrol car's headlights cutting through the darkness. When Robert spotted the green pickup truck, his first impression was that it was a drunk driver or someone who had fallen asleep at the wheel. The vehicle was stopped in the middle of the road, slightly tilted towards the dirt shoulder. The lights were completely off, and there was no sign of movement. Robert positioned his patrol car behind the pickup truck, turned on the emergency lights, and activated the spotlight directed at the rear window. The light flooded the interior of the vehicle, revealing the silhouette of a man sitting in the driver's seat, completely motionless. Robert picked up the radio and reported his location, describing the situation as a possible welfare check. He cautiously exited the vehicle, adjusting his vest and placing his hand near his holstered weapon. The body camera on his chest was already recording, capturing every detail of that encounter that would be reviewed dozens of times in the following months. The sound of Robert's footsteps on the dirt road echoed in the stillness of the night. He approached slowly from the driver's side, maintaining enough distance to react if anything went wrong. As he got closer, Robert tapped on the driver's side window with his knuckles, his voice projecting with authority. The man inside the truck didn't move. Robert tapped again, harder this time, and finally the figure moved. The man's head slowly turned toward the window, and it was at that moment that Robert felt the first shiver run down his spine. The man's face was pale, almost greenish under the spotlight, and his eyes were fixed on Robert with a disturbing intensity. It wasn't the look of someone confused or frightened. It was something different, something empty. Robert asked the man to lower the window, but there was no response. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. The officer then gestured for the driver to unlock the door, but the man remained motionless, just watching. Robert felt the tension rising. He had dealt with people under the influence of drugs before, had seen people in shock, but this was different. There was something profoundly wrong with this situation. After a few seconds that seemed to last an eternity, the driver finally raised his hand and unlocked the door. The click of the locking mechanism was the only sound besides the distant buzzing of crickets in the desert. Robert opened the door slowly, keeping one hand near his gun. The man remained seated, staring straight ahead now, as if Robert were no longer there. The officer asked for the vehicle's registration and driver's license, but the man didn't respond. He just breathed slowly, his shoulders rising and falling mechanically. Robert repeated the order, this time more firmly. The man finally turned his face back to the officer, and it was at that moment that it happened. The driver's eyes, which before had seemed merely empty and distant, began to change. Robert saw with his own eyes something he couldn't explain. The man's iris, which was dark brown, began to glow with a reddish hue. It wasn't the reflection of the emergency lights from the patrol car. It wasn't an optical illusion. It was a luminescence coming from within, as if something were burning behind those eyes. Robert instinctively recoiled, his hand going straight for the gun. He drew his pistol in one swift motion, pointing it at the driver while yelling for him to show his hands. The man didn't move. He just kept staring at Robert with those eyes gleaming red, a color that pulsed faintly, like embers in a nearly extinguished campfire. The officer shouted again, demanding that the man get out of the vehicle with his hands visible. Nothing, just silence, and that unsettling look. Robert's body camera captured everything. In the files that were later analyzed by experts, the glint in the driver's eyes is clearly visible. There was no technical explanation for it. Some suggested it could be a reflection of the camera's infrared light, but technicians ruled out that possibility. Others speculated about the use of special contact lenses or some kind of electronic device, but nothing was found in the vehicle or on the suspect. Robert, still pointing his weapon, called for backup on the radio, his voice trembling with adrenaline. He kept his distance, never taking his eyes off the man in the truck. 2 minutes passed that felt like an eternity before another patrol car arrived. Officer Martinez, who was patrolling the area, heard the emergency call and sped to County Road. When Martinez got out of his car and approached, Robert was visibly shaken, which was unusual for an experienced police officer like him. Martinez asked what was happening, and Robert simply pointed to the driver inside the truck. Martinez looked inside the vehicle and saw the man still sitting, motionless, but now his eyes were closed. Robert insisted that the man's eyes were glowing red, but Martinez saw nothing of the sort. He asked Robert to put away his weapon and tried to communicate with the driver. This time the man responded. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but perfectly audible. He said he was just resting, that he had stopped because he was too tired to drive. Martinez asked for his documentation, and the man handed it over without resistance. The name on the driver's license was David Kowalski, 42 years old, a resident of a small town about 50 kilometers away. Everything seemed in order. No outstanding arrest. Warrants, no prior offenses. Martinez asked if David was under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and he denied it. A quick breathalyzer test was performed and came back negative. David appeared completely sober, at least physically. Martinez decided to let David go with a warning not to stop in the middle of the road again. Robert protested, insisting that something was very wrong with that man, but there was no legal basis to detain him. David started the truck, which ran perfectly and slowly, drove off down the road, disappearing into the darkness. Robert stood there, still processing what he had seen. Martinez tried to calm him down, suggesting that perhaps it was just tiredness or work stress, but Robert knew it wasn't that at all. He had seen something inexplicable. In the following days, Robert couldn't get that image out of his head. The red eyes gleaming in the darkness, that empty, disturbing gaze. He reviewed the body camera footage dozens of times, always seeing the same thing. The glow was there, clear as day. He showed the video to other colleagues, and they were all equally disturbed. Some thought it was some kind of trick, others were speechless. One of the most senior officers suggested that perhaps it was best not to think too much about it, that some things simply have no explanation. But Robert couldn't let it go. He began researching David Kowalski, trying to understand who this man was. What he discovered was even more disturbing. David had a history of psychiatric hospitalizations, having been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia in his early 20s. He had spent time in mental health institutions, but in recent years he seemed stable, living alone and working as a janitor at an elementary school. There were no records of violence, nothing to indicate imminent danger. Robert tried to find David by visiting the address listed on his driver's license. The house was a small wooden building in a rural area, surrounded by vacant lots and a few dry trees. Robert knocked on the door, but no one answered. He spoke with neighbors who said David was a quiet, almost invisible person. Some didn't even know he lived there. One neighbor mentioned that in recent weeks he had seen strange lights coming from David's house at night, as if he were using flashlights or candles, but nothing that seemed truly worrying. Weeks later, Robert received a call from the police department. David Kowalski had been found dead in his home. The cause of death was determined to be suicide by hanging. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of foul play. The house was clean, almost empty, except for a few personal belongings and several handwritten notes scattered on the bedroom floor. The notes were incoherent, full of strange drawings and nonsensical phrases. One of them read, "They are inside me now, seeing through my eyes." Another, "The red light won't stop. It burns inside. I can't turn it off." Robert went to the house to see the place for himself. He looked at those notes and felt a chill in his stomach. There was something deeply disturbing about those words, a sense that David was fighting against something he couldn't control. Robert never knew for sure what had happened that night on County Road, but one thing was certain, that man's eyes weren't normal. There was something there, something that didn't belong to the world of the living. The body camera footage was filed in the police department's records, but was never released publicly. Some officers who saw the video reported having nightmares afterward, dreaming of glowing red eyes in the darkness. Robert requested a transfer to another patrol area, avoiding County Road whenever possible. He never spoke openly again about what he saw that night, but those who knew him knew that something had changed in him. Years later, a private investigator interested in paranormal cases heard about the incident and tried to gain access to the recording. The department denied the request, claiming it was confidential material related to a closed investigation. The investigator, however, managed to speak with Robert, who reluctantly shared some details. He described the feeling of being in the presence of something that wasn't human, something that was merely using David Kowalski's body as a vessel. Robert said that, at that moment, when he saw the eyes glow red, he felt he was looking directly at something evil, something that shouldn't exist. The story spread discreetly among police officers and investigators of unexplained phenomena, becoming a kind of urban legend within the police force. Many doubted the veracity of the facts, believing that Robert had exaggerated or misinterpreted what he saw. But those who saw the recording knew there was no exaggeration. The red glow in David's eyes was real, and there was no rational explanation for it. To this day, no one knows for sure what Robert Henshaw encountered that night on County Road. Some believe David was possessed by something supernatural. Others suggest it was a side effect of some rare medical condition. Some say David was conducting some kind of occult experiment, trying to open portals to other dimensions. There are no answers, only questions. What is certain is that, for Robert, that night changed everything. He never looked at a routine approach the same way again, because now he knew that sometimes what's on the other side of the window isn't human.